Sharon has graciously agreed to share her knowledge and her research that she's been doing on mandalas. Her talk today is titled "The Universality of the Mandala and its use as a tool for spiritual." And you'll also have to meet people, Vladimir, because we're getting
might be budgetary in nature.
stay muted.
And wait for the turnaround. It's going in some way.
Second here.
Lesson we
Okay. Sorry about that, Shay. So as mentioned on our website, Sharon's session today will be longer than an hour because we want to have time for questions and answers for a core presentation. We'll take probably 55, 60 minutes. And at that point, we'll open it up, and any comments or questions that you have of Sharon, please stay on with us if possible for that Q&A session. And just to do a short but formal introduction to Sharon. Sharon says she began reading the writings of Sri Aurobindo about 50 years ago after finding letters on yoga in a used bookstore. She holds a PhD in psychology and is now retired from working in schools and private practice. She now lives in Saratoga Springs in upstate New York. And Sharon, I've kept that brief. You may want to just say a little bit more about your background and your interest in mandalas and your education. And of course, introduce the topic. And you will just have to unmute yourself, Sharon.
How's that?
That is perfect.
I'm unmuted? Okay. I'm new to Zoom, so excuse the awkwardness and any tech issues that come up. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. I think these Sunday morning sessions have been wonderful. The speakers have all been really good, and they've set the bar pretty high. I'm not sure I can reach it on tiptoe today, but I'm going to try. I worked as a psychologist for many years, decades, and I've been retired now for a while. But as a psychologist, I did a lot of additional training in Jung at the Jung Centers in New York and Boston. And so that's where I really delved into symbolism and especially the mandala. You know, the mandala was really important to Jung. So can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. Mandala in the East, mandala in the West. I'll probably oscillate between the two. This is going to be a highly visual presentation. If you're listening on an iPhone, I'm a little concerned you might not see the images and the details. The most important information is going to be visual. And I'm going to do a broad sweep. And I kind of have to try to balance an elephant on the top of a pin. I have to find a balance between enough information, but not too much information. Symbols, especially mandalas, carry multiple levels of meaning to multiple people in multiple ways. And if we analyze them too much, we'll block their dialogue with the intuition. And it's really the conversation between the mandala and the intuition that becomes exciting. So I'm going to try to keep my comments to a minimum and let the mandala speak for you in your own way. I want to tell you a story before we get started. When I was, back when I was working in the schools, I was working with a student for several years who was diagnosed with autism. And he did have many kind of classical behaviors of that nature. And when he would come in my office, I would put a paper with an empty circle in front of him and give him some magic markers. And for about 5-10 minutes, he would draw with the circle. Now, most of the people I did this with would immediately draw something symmetrical, sometimes geometric, sometimes like a flower, and the center would always be defined. But not this student. he would have squiggly lines through the circle, outside the circle, inside the circle. Sometimes he'd hit the center, but it was pretty random. And after months of this, I thought, well, this isn't really working. Maybe I should go on to something else. But he always asked to do them. So after years, he was in his 20s, I think, and he stopped by to see me. And he said, you know, Dr. Sassaman, I still do my mind clearers. And I said, your mind clearers? Because we had never named them. He said, yeah, you know, the circles. I do one every day. They calm me down. So even though I couldn't see it outwardly, they were helping inwardly. And Carl Jung used to draw a mandala every day for quite a while. And he claimed that it was this practice that was instrumental in leading him to his understanding of what he called the psychic ground of being. Some of his mandalas are published in the Red Book. They're kind of interesting to look at. So we can start the slides now, Radha.
Let me just screen share here and then you just tell me, whoops, are you gonna do it, Vladimir? You're muted.
Yes, because you sent to me, so I thought.
I sent to you, but that's okay. She wants a slideshow though.
Okay, then I stop.
You want me to do or what's?
Yeah, please go ahead.
And then just keep an eye out for people can do it.
Okay, and now this is the whole, there we go. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. So I have 3 goals today. The first is to have you experience the geography of the mandala in your own experience and in your own meditation. The second is to create a sense of awe at the expressive power of the mandala. And the third is to give an appreciation of the universal uses of the mandala in all the religious faiths and faith practices throughout the world. You know, we live in the house of integral yoga, and that's where we go for our sustenance and our learning and our community. But we have to work in the world and walk on the street. And it's always helpful to know a few words in other languages to build bridges to others. And I think the mandala is a bridge builder. Okay, next slide. The mandala is the primary visual image for meditation, just like Om is the primary auditory symbol. And
Sharon, I'm going to stop a second. Vladimir mentioned he's getting a different image here. Vladimir, maybe you should do the slideshow because of the way I've got my monitor set up. They were seeing a double thing, Sharon, so just give us a second. I think it's better if Vladimir does it. And just slideshow. You do slideshow, Vladimir.
okay, now this is the whole slideshow. It's not just one image.
So I'm still not seeing this. Everyone seeing the slideshow?
No.
Seeing
Yes, we're seeing the slide and we're seeing all of the slides listed on the left.
yeah, we're trying to do a slideshow here, Vladimir. Let's try one more time here.
Yeah, Zoom did not accept it, so it dropped me off, and so I'm coming back. Better to show it slide by slide. I will make them very small that people will not see them. It is the same as any other show. That's what we do usually.
Yeah, I know. She was just hoping for a slideshow, but that's okay if we can't do it.
It's better than what we saw from you, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, you okay with this, Sharon? We won't be
Sure, can
slideshow.
everyone see it? Can everyone see the main image in the middle?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me back up. The mandala is the visual equivalent of Om. And Om, both Om and the mandala are portals to enter sacred space. They provide a passageway between different states of consciousness. And like with Om, when you're meditating with Om, you're immersing yourself into the sound. The sound is actually resonating inside you as well as around you. And the same is true when you meditate with a mandala. You're inside the mandala. So I'd like to put application before theory today. I think Don will like this. And I'd like to begin by using the mandala as a geometry for meditation. So next slide. Because without this, everything else is theory. An inner experience with the mandala is the foundation of all its other uses. After all, the mandala is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional inner experience. Let me repeat that. The mandala is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional inner experience. So let's focus on the circle to the left. The center is defined, so it is the first movement out of oneness towards consciousness. And keep your eyes open. Let your mind be gently drawn to the center of the circle. And hold it there in stillness for a half a minute. Okay, now move to the three-dimensional sphere on the right. And again, let your mind relax into the center of the sphere. And hold it quietly there for a half a minute. So this is a concentration exercise which I found to be helpful for students managing ADHD energy. But I've used it with you today here to orient you to the simplicity of the mandala. The profound is often found in the simple, and so is stillness. So I'd like to try something else. Remember that meditation is fluid. Mandalas are always moving. Energy is dynamic. I want you to keep looking at the sphere on the right. And I'm going to read from Sri Aurobindo. While you listen, imagine within the sphere what Sri Aurobindo is describing. In yoga experience, the consciousness widens in every direction, around, below, above, in each direction stretching to infinity. When the consciousness of the yogi becomes liberated, it is not in the body, but in this infinite height, depth, and wideness that he lives. Its basis is an infinite void or silence, but in that all can manifest: peace, freedom, power, light, knowledge, ananda. This consciousness is usually called the consciousness of the self, or Atman, for it is pure existence that is the source of all things and contains all things. Source and containment. Next slide. So Now we'll meditate using the sphere in relationship to our own body. I'm sure that most of you, probably all of you, have already experienced this. If you've ever meditated on a flower or centered yourself in your heart and called on the mother. But let me talk you through it first so that during the meditation, I don't want to interrupt you. So this is best done with your eyes closed. Put the center of the sphere near your heart chakra, perhaps slightly behind. And breathe and relax the mind into the center. Adjust the circumference to where it feels right. Be aware of any movement from the center or the circumference or the space in between. Keep your mind calm and quiet in the center with your peripheral awareness encompassing the whole. And remember to include your body. I'll end the meditation with a bell. From Savitri. Across the lowly threshold with bowed heads, angels of ecstasy and self-giving pass, and lodge in an inner sanctuary of dream, where the makers of the image of deity live. Across the lowly threshold with bowed heads, angels of ecstasy and self-giving pass, and lodge in an inner sanctuary of dream, where the makers of the image of deity live. Image of deity. Next slide. When working with meditative symbols, the process of immersion and absorption are key. We immerse ourselves into the many layers of the symbol, and we absorb the symbol into the many layers of our being. When we practice these two processes of immersion and absorption, the symbol comes alive, and it starts to speak to our third ear. Symbols whisper visually what words cannot convey. They suggest and imply rather than define or explain. They can hold the mysteries of the beyond, and at the same time, they can offer our limited minds a way to contemplate these mysteries. But don't misunderstand me. Symbols point in the direction of the mysteries to something that we don't yet fully understand. They may provide a passage to other levels approaching the mystery, but they don't define the mystery because the mystery can't be defined. The symbol can only open the door to the touch of the divine. I love that, the touch of the divine. One of Sri Aurobindo's phrases I dearly love. All spiritual aspirants long for the touch of the divine. So all religions and all spiritual paths in their esoteric aspect use symbols and images to point toward the transcendent realms. They also point, or we try to encapsulate them, we try to encapsulate our experiences of them with symbols and images because words just don't describe them. Next slide. Mandalas activate connection. They can be simple or complex, and they can be used to suggest an inner organization of consciousness. The mandala, however, always has the foundation of the circle. It can invoke meditative states that stem from absolute stillness of mind. And in its use as a meditative tool, it conveys the ultimate state of wholeness or oneness with the divine. So if you put the language of integral yoga into mandala language, you have the supramental contracting into various concentric spheres, down into mind, down into matter, or you have the consciousness of matter expanding through concentric spheres toward the supramental. So instead of having a linear concept, you have a spherical concept. Sri Aurobindo writes, mind attains its self-fulfillment when it becomes a pure mirror of the truth of being, which expresses itself in the symbols of the universe. Mind attains its self-fulfillment when it becomes a pure mirror of the truth of being, which expresses itself in the symbols of the universe. Truth of being. Next slide. The mandala is the most simple yet profound mirror of the universe. It points to the macrocosm and to the microcosm. Next slide. And to the light pervading both. Symbols have the ability to embody paradox. They can bridge between two seemingly contradictory concepts, kind of like light is both a particle and a wave. And because it holds so many meanings on so many levels, a symbol can unite opposition into harmony. And this is especially true of the mandala. And I want to underscore this with an example, but it's going to kind of take us down a side street. So if you don't mind, next slide. We're going to divert into Greek mythology for a minute. The mother explains that all symbols aren't universal. There's a difference between a symbol that can point to universal truths that are read by all cultures and those that remain limited to culture. Now, this one is culture bound, but it's such a good example of bridging between two contradictory concepts that I couldn't not show it to you. So this is the Greek god Hermes and his caduceus. The caduceus has two snakes intertwining around the central staff of Asclepius. Asclepius was the physician. Things on top. You might see a little bit of the sushumna here. So it's the staff of healing. The medical profession still uses it today. Now, Hermes is the messenger of the gods. He goes from Mount Olympus to the humans on earth and to the gods and the residents in the underworld. So he moves through three realms: body, mind, and spirit. So this suggests that healing takes place when the energies flow freely again between body, mind, and spirit. But the really important thing to know, the fun thing to know, is that Hermes received the caduceus from Apollo. Apollo is the god of the creative arts: music, drama, poetry, dance, the nine muses. So you have this connection between Hermes and Apollo, between the creative arts and the science of medicine. So now healing becomes not only a science, but an art. But you won't know that this is what the symbol embodies unless you know Greek mythology. So it's culture bound. Next slide. So here are actually three symbols and a common practice that are universal. Each figure has three universal symbols. Can you find them? Vladimir gave the sign of the halo. That's one.
The color blue.
The color blue, right. Not just the color blue, but the shade of blue. That's two.
There's a snake in there too at the bottom.
And
Looks
the
like a
snake.
snake at the bottom.
Yes, yes, they're both standing on snakes. Mhm. Can you find the fourth?
Water?
Pardon me?
Water?
Water? No, Mary's not on water. She's on a snake, but it's not the water. But that is a universal symbol. Both of these figures embody love. And you'll note that the halo, in this case, the mandala, is the link between the transcendent and the body. It suggests that the light of true being has been actualized. It's the bridge between the finite and the infinite. So, application alert. John, I heard you last week. Why is this important to know? Knowing universal aspects of symbols places you within a more expansive circle of humanity. And when universal symbols begin to talk to you, you have a loquacious partner for life. Next slide. So let's look at the infinity of the mandala. It's infinite in three aspects. The circumference never ends. The area is infinite because to get the area, you multiply radius squared by pi, and we know that pi is an infinite number. So you can never actually calculate the true area of a circle. It's infinite. And the center is also infinite. Next slide. You can intuit this more clearly if you look at the center. So the dot defines the center, right? Not exactly. It only approximates the center because inside that dot is a smaller dot that approximates the center even more accurately. And inside that dot is a smaller dot that gets even closer to the center. And so on. You never really get to the center. It's infinite. Okay. Next slide. It's also primary. This is one of the archetypal aspects of symbols that go so deep into our psyche is that, well, Jung would say we're born with them. They're like a blueprint in the psyche, in the bedrock of mind. It's the first shape a child draws instinctively. In the same way that the ah of is the first sound that an infant makes. These were drawn in the second year of life. And look at the one on the right. Look at how much practice goes into controlling the shape and the size and the placement. And this sequence holds for all children, regardless of whether they go to preschool or not, whether they're living in Europe or in South America, whether they're rich or they're poor. Children will instinctively teach themselves to draw a circle at about the same age. Next slide. They're also ancient. And next slide. They arise spontaneously in dreams and visions. So the one on the left is Ezekiel's dream, as recounted in the Old Testament. You might recall Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. So this dream has 4 creatures. They each have 4 heads and 4 wings. And beside each of them is a wheel. And Ezekiel describes the wheels as being constructed as a wheel within a wheel. And when the living creatures moved, the wheels moved with them, for the spirit of the creatures were in the wheels. The one in the middle is a painting by Hildegard von Bingen. She didn't write at length about her visions, but she did paint them. So note the figure in blue. Same color, same shade. And I don't know if you can see it, but there is a mandala on the right knee. The last one is from Black Elk. He was an elder of the Ogallala Lakota, and he talked at length about his vision dreams because in the native cultures of North America, a vision dream was considered to be for the benefit of all of the people. It wasn't just for the individual who dreamt the dream. In this dream, there were groups of 12 horses, each at the 4 cardinal points of the mandala. The cardinal points are sacred to the Native Americans, and they are for many, many early cultures. They mark the 4 directions on the horizon, the 4 seasons, the 4 times of day, the 4 stages of life, the 4 elements. They gave the people a proper orientation as to their place in the universe, their place in time and space. These cardinal points come up over and over and over in mandalas. And actually, they come to represent the mandala itself. So why am I showing you these? Why is it important? because I want you to be alert to your own dreams and visions. Many dreams are mundane, but mandala dreams are among those that are helpful and probably are worth noting and contemplating. Jayashri had a wonderful seminar on conscious sleep. She might have something to add here. Jayashri, you want to jump in on dreams?
Thank you, first of all, Sharon, for this wonderful presentation. It's amazing, mind-blowing, and very intuitive. As for your question about mandala and dreams, I think it requires a very special consciousness to get a mandala in a dream, to see a mandala in a dream, because it has to be permeated into the consciousness. One needs to be working and understanding the symbols that you just brought forth for us, be aware of mandalas and their importance in our life, kind of push it into the consciousness. And then I think it's a dream of a very deep, subliminal inner being. As you said, it's a meditative state. So yes, it is possible. And I think anyone who experiences such a dream will come out a changed person. But thank you so much.
Yes.
There is something interesting comes to mind with this sleep. In the dreams, we always try to come back to the beginning. I think this kind of coming back to the beginning, what child wants to do also, kind of come where you start from, go around and then come back. And in the dreams, it's very difficult to come back to the same spot. Did you notice? To find the way back to where you started is nearly impossible. There are some obstacles always which are leading you away, and you're so frustrated that you can't find way back. You cannot go back somehow in the dream. And this is something interesting, maybe from psychological point of view.
Also, I just wanted to quickly mention, the circles and the colors. These are symbolic that come up in dreams, but they might come up in, like you said, everyone has a special mandala that they work with, or the mandala keeps changing its form. But these are the universal things to look at and to remember in the dream, the circles that come up, the moving circles, the expansion and the contraction, and the colors.
Yes.
And especially what it evokes in you. What kind of a feeling you wake up with?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go on to the next slide. And of course, mandalas are universal. There's a lot to look at here, and I do want to go through them at least briefly. And you ask, okay, so why is it important to look at all of them? Well, I don't think that integral yoga was ever intended to be a path of isolation. When we intermingle with peoples of the world who have different faith practices, it's always helpful to look for similarities and commonalities rather than differences and separations. It's helpful to know where the points of intersection lie. Otherwise, we spin into ego and we say, well, my religion is the true religion, or my spiritual path is the best. And we create a kind of hierarchy that is really for prestige. So I think that mandala is one of the points of intersection that we can honor in other people's faith systems and can bridge to a dialogue with them. So I'll go across the first row from left to right. The first one is the rose window of Notre Dame. And thankfully, it was not harmed in the recent fire. It was common in the Middle Ages for Gothic cathedrals to have these rose windows built into the west wall. They represented Mother Mary, and even by then she was associated, closely associated with the rose, especially the white rose and the red rose. The next one is the Celtic knot from pre-Christian Ireland. And they were a weaving culture. So, of course, an image like this would be natural for them to see many levels of meaning in it. When Christianity came up to Ireland, they put this mandala in the center of the Roman cross. So they wedded the two symbols together. The next one, of course, is Om, which resonates from the center to all points. It's an auditory mandala. The next one is the Greek cross. This was adopted officially by the Eastern Orthodox Church, but it was the cross that was used quite widely through the Roman and Byzantine empires during the early years of Christianity. And you note it's balanced, it's symmetrical, it's abstract, so it can be a tool for a centering meditation. But then when the churches split, Rome and Constantinople had their arguments and they split. And so after that, the Roman Catholic Church took the cross with the extended leg. And that changed everything because it's no longer abstract and it's no longer balanced. So it kind of became diluted as a deep archetypal mandala. But you know what's really interesting is the one on the right, you'll see that there's a mandala in the center. And that's from modern times. Many Protestant churches, at least here in America, you will see this cross with the mandala in the center. It has creeped back in. And I don't know, if the church leaders did this consciously or unconsciously, but the balanced mandala is back on the altars in many Christian churches. So we'll go to the second row, the Tai Chi Tu, China's yin and yang, balancing. The next one is the Sudarshana Chakra, Vishnu spinning eternal time. The one in the center needs no introduction. The next one is the Hopi, Sacred Circle of Life, and it reminds man of his connection to all of nature. You'll notice that at the very top, it's open. And the Hopi believe, the Anastasi, which was the ancient civilization which Hopi evolved from, they believe that man was birthed upward from the womb of Mother Earth. And so you have an opening at the top. And the next one is the Dome of El Aqsa on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. So if you're in the mosque looking up, that's what you would see. The Islamic faith does not allow for any symbols. But if you look at their architecture, it's filled with mandalas. On the third row, we have the Star of David with the ascending and descending triangles. And then you have the Kala Chakra, one of the teaching mandalas of Tibetan Buddhism. And the lotus flower, sacred throughout Asia, as Buddha's throne, or as Brahma's throne or cradle of creation. And then you have an astrological wheel linking the starry heavens with earthly life. And you had these in every society. You had, the Mayans had one, the Persians, the Tibetans, the Indians, they all had their own astrological wheel and how it related to earthly events. And some, that at least the ones we use now, which came from Mesopotamia, actually, links it to psychology. And the last one again is the mosque on the Temple Mount. And you can see the architecture. It's a 6-sided mandala with the dome on top. Next slide. So I would be remiss if I didn't commend the Tibetans for taking the art of the mandala to the height of beauty. I mean, the artistry is amazing and the details. The Tibetans have projected onto the mandala and drawn within it an entire philosophical worldview in detailed symbolism. The mandalas show the psychology, the practices and cautions of the path towards enlightened mind, as well as man's relationship to the cosmos. You might say that they're textbooks created at a time when every book had to be written out by hand and there wasn't a lot of paper, and there were thousands of monks to teach. So they're perhaps the most complex and multi-leveled mandalas that we have, although this mapping is done in every culture. The three here, let's see, the three here are the three main ones that the Tibetan Book of the Dead talk about. And I thought of going into all the symbolism, but it's just too complex. We have to do it in another time. The one on the left is the Wheel of Life, and the one in the middle are the 5 wisdom Buddhas, and the one on the left is the Kala Chakra. I want to say something about the Kala Chakra, though. The Dalai Lama has written a book about this, 500 pages, because it's the one that is most often used to create a San mandala for the practice of impermanence and detachment. So it's the one that the public most often sees, and he wanted clear understanding. He starts right off in the beginning of the book saying that these mandalas are not secret, they're not magic, they're not mystical, and they can benefit everyone because their wisdom is on so many levels that the beginning aspirant as well as the advanced aspirant can always find new lessons inside them. Next slide. Again, this is the Kala Chakra. You can kind of see where it comes from. The one on the left is 2-dimensional. The one on the right is 3-dimensional, and the one in the middle is 3-dimensional, and the one on the right is 4-dimensional in time and space. And what I find interesting here is that Saint Teresa of Avila, on the other side of the world, she also used a mandala of an inner castle to portray the journey, the inner journey. And both of these systems has at the third level is when the difficulties start. It's when the aspirant begins to see that, oh, maybe the way I've been using mind isn't the best way. Maybe I'm harming myself. Maybe I need to change. And so it's when the friction starts. And what's interesting is that the friction goes and the need for self-examination gets deeper and deeper. But it's also the level where humility blossoms. So before we go on to the next section, does anyone have anything they want to share? No? Okay, let's go on. Next
Sharon,
slide. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's Julie. The
Could you just repeat what you said about that the friction and um, what was the sign
Well,
you were in that place and seeing this structure? I couldn't quite understand.
okay, this structure is very complex. Saint Teresa of Avil's castle has 7 sections. This one has 5, but you enter this one from these concentric circles of where you are letting go of the non-aspirant aspect of life. So at the 3rd level, which is really hard to see here, and I don't want to blow it up, but both systems of thought are saying that at the beginning, everything is rosy, and you work with symbols in quite a concrete way. But then the symbols become more abstract, and you begin to understand the teachings on the spiritual path with a little more subtlety. And then in the 3rd stage, you realize that, oh, the teachings are all about transformation. And it's like a light goes on. And that's when the work begins.
Wow, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's go on. Next slide. So when I was thinking of how to contract this huge topic into an hour introduction, there were 3 words that kept coming back and coming back: immersion, absorption, and the 3rd was motion. So here again, we have the circle with the center defined. Once we define the center, we can define the cross diameters. And once we have that, we can define the square. And the mother talks about the square as representing building, constructing, and completion. And that parallels with what Jung and the Dalai Lama write about the square. So I want you to imagine that you're living, say, 5,000 years before the Common Era, and you're making a drum for a sacred ceremony. Your deerskin is soaking in the river while you're polishing your wooden hoop with a pumice stone. And you stretch the deerskin over the rim and tie it with rawhide or sinew, and it will tighten as it dries. And then you go into the field and you gather plants for dyes, and you paint the sacred 4 directions on the head of the drum. But you're not done yet. You find 4 feathers, hopefully hawk or eagle, and you tie one at each of the 4 cardinal points. And now you spin it. What happens to the feathers? Can you imagine that? They're going to fly out at right angles. Next slide. And so you have the swastika. Can you see how if you tie a ribbon on to the 4 cardinal points of the circle and you spin it, you're going to get these 2 forms. My understanding is that swastika is a Sanskrit word meaning well-being. Is that true, Vladimir? Are there other subtleties?
Yeah, definitely. Su asti, well-being, sign of well-being.
Okay. So when I started researching this 40 years ago, my question was, does the directionality of turning matter? And I read a lot of different ideas. Turning left is going inward, turning right is going outward, turning left is the moon in the night, turning right is the sun in the day, Turning left is toward dissolution, turning right is toward integration. The lower chakras turn left and the upper chakras turn right. There was as many suggestions as there were writers. So when I lived in China over a span of 8 years, I decided to do a little survey of my own. I traveled quite extensively throughout East Asia, and I saw many temples, many monasteries, many statues with swastikas on them. And so I always noted the direction of spin. And I found that they spin fairly equally throughout Japan, in both directions, throughout Japan, China, Thailand, Tibet, Malaysia, and Indonesia. I didn't go to Cambodia. Believe me, I looked and I took note. Next slide. So the upper left is Japan, it's spinning to the right. The upper right is Thailand, and it's spinning to the right also. The lower two are Indonesia and China, and they're spinning to the left. And I didn't seem to see a pattern of whether they were on stairways leading up to the temple, or the door over the temple, or a Kuan Yin or a Buddha statue. I didn't seem to see a pattern of, do they spin in one direction in one situation and the other in another situation. So next slide. And then the Navajo culture, they spin in both directions as well, pretty equally. These rugs are 150 years old. Next slide. And also in Dharamsala and Tibet, both directions. So I've fallen back on the most reliable source I have for my own truth, my own inner experience. And whenever I've felt the inward turning of energy, it's always been very helpful, regardless of which direction it spins in. It may be different speeds, different places in the body, but it's always been healing. I don't know if any of you have had any other experiences or readings that can shed more light on this. Anyone? No, then let's go on. Next slide. So here's what we do know about the turning mandala. We know that it suggests time. Here's the Sudarshana chakra of Vishnu. And in the Rig Vedas, it suggests time. Why time? Because it refers to the wheel of the sun's chariot. And on the right, I don't know if you can see it, but Vishnu on his left forefinger is a spinning disc. So he's spinning time so that Brahma can create, Vishnu can sustain, and Shiva can destroy. You get the cycle of rising, forming, sustaining, and then dissolving. Without time, none of that would take place. So time is the engine of change. As it spins, energy is released into the world of form, and form is ever changing. The only constant here is Vishnu spinning the mandala of time. Next slide.
There is something which comes to the mind of these different ways of different kind of. If you turn to the north and look at the sun rising, this will be from the right to the left. And if you turn to the south, you will see that the sun is rising from the left to the right. So you will have two different spinnings because there are two different yanas. There is to the north, there is Devayana, and to the south is Pitriyana. And they are simultaneously needed for our evolution. That's why both, most probably.
Oh, that's wonderful. I knew you would have a diamond for me, Vladimir. Thank you. It also connects to the sacredness of the four directions and what you see as you stand facing each one. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. So we also know that the turning mandala suggests energy. And we know this because the centers in the body spin. Many people have felt this. I'm sure many of you have at some point felt a shifting of energy in one of the chakras, a turning, or even a spinning. Enough people have felt this that we've developed a whole system around it. China developed one. The Mayan culture had one. The Bon culture in Tibet before Buddhism arrived had one. They were all different though. They didn't all have 7 chakras, and some of them had just 5, some of them had just 4. The Indian and the Chinese system has the flow of energy going in both directions. It has the ascending and the descending. But the Bon and the Anastasi systems definitely emphasized the descending. And for them, the crown chakra was the closest to the earth element. And it was the crown chakra that guided the person through the material world. Next slide. So the turning mandala also suggests balance. The one on the left is spinning to the right. The one on the right is spinning to the left. And they're black and white. But when you spin it, what do you see? Are they still black and white? They become gray. If they were blue and red and you spun it, they'd be purple. It'd be purple. So the deeper suggestion of the Tai Chi Chu has to do not with balance of the opposites, but with the integration of the opposites, the interweaving of warp and weft. My Chinese teacher told me to make sure that I emphasized for you that the Tai Chi Chu is constant change. She said, as soon as you reach the top, you will start to decline. And as soon as you reach the bottom, you will start to rise. And this idea of integration is so important because if you think of it, now we're going through a period where we're beginning to integrate on a cultural level the opposites of masculine and feminine. We're beginning to integrate them, and as a result, social roles are changing. I want to point out something else. There are 2 subcenters. There's a black dot and a white dot. So what does that look like if you spin? You get the wheel within a wheel, Ezekiel's dream. So in the spinning mandala, you have time, you have energy, you have balance, you have integration, you have change, and of course, you have the stillness that's in the center. So application alert. Why is it important to know about the turning mandala? because it helps us to shift from static linear thinking to a more dynamic view of everything. Everything, ourselves, others, the world, the universe, time, everything is constantly in motion. I think the mind likes to rest in absolutes, but nothing stays the same. My own application of this is when I find myself stuck in an opinion or one-sidedness, I'll imagine spinning at the crown chakra, and usually it spins a new idea into my thoughts. But the most important reason to contemplate the spinning mandala is to remind ourselves to practice our practice. Because a mandala, like the teachings, is stagnant until we put it into action. Next slide. Oh, we're going to skip this one. Go ahead to the next one. So this is the most extraordinary mandala of all. I've saved the best to last. How many mandalas do you see in this lotus?
One.
One? You want to describe it to us?
Well, it's a circle. Circle within the circle within the circle with one center. So what can you do? There are not many centers. But of course, you can see many more superimposed.
It may be infinite, right? Within each center, there's a finer center. With each finer center, there's another. I would say maybe infinite.
Get more corporal. You have the mandala of the petals. You have the mandala of the stamens. You have the center of the stamens where the pistil comes out of. And mandala refers to both center as well as circumference. You have the circle on top of the pistil. And in that circle, you have a circle of 10 dots. And inside that, you have the 4 dots of the 4 directions. And inside that, you have the absolute center. So for our human eyes alone, there's 7 mandalas. And the lotus is also moving. It's opening and closing with the circling of the earth, which in turn creates the rising and setting of the sun. Rising and setting, opening and closing, circling and circling, all connected to light. No wonder the lotus is considered to be Buddha's throne of enlightenment and Brahma's cradle of creation. It's really remarkable. Next slide. So I want to leave you with the thought that perhaps we ourselves are the mandala. As center, we are constantly expressing energy. And as circumference, we are constantly moving through the larger mandala of the universe. Next slide. And always, always, we touch and are touched by the divine.
All can be done if the
Yeah.
good touch is there, good touch is there.
Maybe on screen share, Vladimir, and we can, if you're ready, Sharon, we can open it up for any comments or.
Please open it up.
Sharon, I'd like to thank you for this wonderful presentation, for reminding us about the importance of application. I love your application alert. It's been coming to me the whole time, and I keep going back to my presentation last week, which I wish was more experiential. I talked too much. That everything can be mandalic. When I saw your Tibetan Buddhist mandalas, I love the Tibetan Buddhists have a saying, to hear all sounds as mantra and see all sights as mandala. And in your last two slides, you really touched on that. It reminded me of the old saying, God is a circle with center everywhere and circumference nowhere. And I'm trying to think, I remember you were involved with dancers, right? You've been involved with working with dancers, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I thought I'd share this, something more concrete. When I worked with dancers in the 70s and 80s as a musician, that was an era where we were breaking all foundations, all structures, letting go of everything, right? A lot of the original Orwellians came from that culture. And I remember sometimes we'd go out from 6th Street and 2nd Avenue, where New York University was, and go on the street. I'd bring my accordion, we'd play and improvise on the street, doing kind of wild modern dance. And most mandalas most of them are circles, some of them are different. And the dancing, when it really felt whole, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. It felt like this moving mandala. So it wasn't necessarily so much about the particular form, but this quality of wholeness, that the whole universe is present in the entire dance, in each note, in each dancer, in each limb. So everything becomes mandalic. I wonder if you,
Ditto.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Swami, I noticed you put a few things there in the chat box. I don't know if people saw it, but that very beautiful drawing, Dreamcatcher mandala. Is that what you put? This was in India. The mandalas that the two women are painting outside that looks like probably their front door or a street.
Yes, actually, I find it as a very bizarre coincidence. This morning, this has been something that I wanted to do for several years, but finally we did a Sudarshana Omam this morning at home, starting at 6 a.m. So Sudarshana Omam is nothing but invoking Lord Sudarshana. We being from the Vaishnavite tradition, lean a lot towards the symbols of Vishnu. And the fact that Sudarshana himself is a mandala, and Sharon is talking so profoundly about this. I find this as a divine coincidence. So firstly, thank you so much, Sharon. This was absolutely beautiful. And the kolam is the art that the women in South India draw outside of their homes. And these intricate designs are meant to invoke within us certain elements of the divine. There used to be quite a bit of divine knowledge behind it. Much of that is lost, but the tradition still goes on. The design that I put in the chat is one of the lotus mandalas with very intricate design. Women draw it. Now it has become more of a competition type of a thing. It has lost its meaning, but in essence, it always holds the art form. The intention behind that art form is to invoke the divine first thing at crack of dawn. And the second one is, of course, the Dreamcatcher mandala, which I'm sure most of you are aware of.
Yes. So did they make these mandalas outside their home as sanctifying the space?
Yes, and it had multi-purpose. The superficial purpose was to invite prosperity to your house.
Mhm.
So and it translates to, oh, if you have a certain way of cleansing the outside of your front door and inviting Mahalakshmi, who is the goddess of prosperity, then our life will be prosperous. So that's the superficial aspect of it. But the way it was taught to me was that each day the mandala will change according to your inner nature.
Mhm. Mhm.
And my mom would always draw the mandala with the 4 corners, always. That was her favorite design. So probably whatever was her inner mandala manifested in the outer version. It was always interesting to see when she would draw the lotus, and each day the designs would change. And I think it was more so the reflection of the person themselves. And there are plenty of designs, but the one that resonates the most is the lotus version. I can send you more details if you're interested.
Yes, please.
Thank you. My infinite gratitude. This was beautiful.
There was a question also about the tilting of the swastika, which Mother mentions. Maybe you can comment. Somebody asks why it becomes evil. Do you have some thoughts?
I have some thoughts, but I'd prefer to hear Mother's comments, if you know them.
Oh, right. She just says that the difference between the swastika, which is straight and tilted a little, like 45 degrees, is creating totally different effect. Yeah. She knew it by experience, but she didn't explain from the point of view of kind of symbolism why.
Well, what comes to mind intuitively is that when the horizon is defined and when the ascending is defined, you have an orientation from the material to the divine. And when it's crossed, when it's tilted, you have a cross, and the orientation to the organization of the universe is lost.
Beautiful. I think this is the thing. I thought about differently because there are dishaha, 4 directions, which are usually straight to the north, straight to the south, straight to the east, and straight to the west. But there are in between these antardishaha. They are known also. And it's quite interesting because they are depicted differently. They have different qualities. Not the same as direct, yeah.
Right, and it's interesting that the tilted cross is also the cross you see in the skull and crossbones. But once that organization of horizon and sky and earth is lost, it changes everything.
Right. I think this is the intuitive and symbolic explanation. Thank you. Didn't think of it.
Would it translate to maybe it being misaligned, the tilt? Could it be interpreted as being misaligned?
It could. I'm going back to the spinning, the turning. And if you're turning, you're going through all those phases. Maybe there's a lesson of where we shouldn't get stuck. To keep turning through.
By the way, there is a lot of ignorance about this sign. And many people in Russia, for example, believe that any swastika is a fascist swastika. They don't know about the tilted image and the straight image. So when they see it in Indian tradition or Tibetan, they are kind of shrinking from it.
In
That's
the
why I
Indian
want to get this
tradition,
out there. I want to get the knowledge out there because it's part of, I think it's part of the world's healing to take back this archetypal symbol and see it as it really is.
Sharon, regarding turning, you were talking about the spinning of energies. And it reminded me a couple of things. One from psychology you'll know very well, but the Buddha speaks about when there is realization. I love this phrase. It's a turning about in the deepest seat of one's being. And Mother speaks of the complete reversal. But if you talk to children and adults too, at different developmental stages, like I worked for a while, many children around 10 to 12, talk about their world being turned inside out as they start to become self-conscious and they're navigating. I'm not a child, I'm not an adult. It feels like my world is spinning.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice in meditation, when you make a certain leap or change, you can actually feel this sense of not your body, but you're spinning, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, I'm not sure if Jayashree mentioned this, but often when you're coming from waking in, and you're actually going consciously into the dream state, many people describe the sense of spinning out of the physical body into the dream world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many, it's interesting too. Yeah, I have some science references, but I want to keep it more experiential. But yeah, so if you look for that feeling of something in your world's been turned inside out, you may be on the verge of a developmental shift.
Yes.
There is something also coming to my mind while Dawn is talking on the swastika, why that was tilted, why actually Hitler tilted it, yeah? Why didn't he keep it straight? Hitler believed there are some documents which were published only in Russia, in communist Russia and socialist Russia, for that reason that they wanted to discard all the mysticism of the fascism and so on. And so what is interesting that Hitler himself was hoping to build the world where only Aryans would live, these blue-eyed, and so all the people had to be killed, including Germans, by the way, according to the plans. So Germans also had to go. Only a new race had to be grown and populated over Earth, and he had to be an emperor who would balance the sun energy on his shoulders and Earth. And I'm now thinking that tilting was needed. Otherwise, it is totally balanced with the divine, with the proper ways of things. Now, if he tilts it, he redirects the energy of the sun through his emperor's shoulders onto Earth and starts manipulating the energy on Earth. This is the mystic part of Hitlerism. It's just kind of came to me that's most probably why he did this, because they believed in a particular energy which they called vril, which pervades the whole universe. Yeah? And that energy had to be managed from the sun to Earth by the emperor. And he had to be the one.
Yeah.
It sounds like a mythology.
We're getting close to 11:30,
Yes,
but we
yes.
want to make, if anybody else would like to make a comment or a question to Sharon. Sharon, this has just been so enlightening and inspirational. And I know you spent quite a bit of time putting this together in PowerPoint, and we just can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. in this area. It's been truly remarkable. Anybody here would like to say anything or comment before we leave, or Sharon yourself?
Oh, just thank you for the opportunity. Of course, whenever you come forward and dive into a project like this, you're the greatest beneficiary. It's been very enlightening.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Wonderful. Simply wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you.
You're welcome.